Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this exclusive webinar on risk sharing agreements. Can innovative outcomes based contracts work? This webinar is brought to you by Actu-Real. Actu-Real is a US based specialized healthcare solutions provider focused on data analytics driven solutions across the continuum of clinical development and commercial stages, with a special focus on value-based healthcare. Actuarial exists to fill a gap in the industry. It combines highly cross-functional expertise across pre-launch and post-launch to provide differentiated solutions to quality, cost, and access challenges in healthcare for pharmaceutical companies, insurers, and healthcare providers. Actuarial provides hands-on leadership in the development and execution of projects using a creative problem-solving approach combined with a proven track record of success. The agenda today is an introduction, which Madhur, our moderator, will take on, followed by case studies from our panel of speakers. It will be followed by a panel discussion, a Q&A, and closing remarks. Our moderator today is Madhur Garg, Vice President and Global Head, RWE, Market Access, and HUR at Actu-Real Inc. Madhur has 12 plus years experience in healthcare in diverse capacities. He has worked across global, EMEA, and JPAC roles in pharma. He is a market access and pricing strategist with HUR technical skills. You can take it over from here, Madhur.
Thank you, Imrose. Again, a very warm welcome to all our attendees. And we have a curated set of speakers and panelists today. An interesting topic: risk sharing agreements. We all know that this is an interesting era when it comes to market access, particularly for specialized portfolio products. Gene therapies and personalized medicines are making headlines with multi-million-dollar price tags. And there is no easy answers that payers have to these products. And often, as a plan B, risk sharing agreements are resorted to and discussed. Risk sharing agreements have different names in different geographies, as our speakers will explore and elaborate on this in the webinar today. So without further ado, let me take this opportunity to thank and introduce, the three speakers we have today. So we have Luca, Khalid, and Paul, who will each present their case studies in that order for 15 odd minutes. So we'll start off with Luca Morlotti. Luca is Vice President, International Access and New Products at Merck MSD. Luca has 25 years of experience in the healthcare industry. He joined MSD in 2014 as Head of Market Access and Pricing for EU-CAN, Europe, Canada, Middle East, and African regions to support launch of the oncology portfolio. And in 2021, he took on the broader responsibility across the entire portfolio for Europe, Canada, market access region. Very warm welcome, Luca. He joins us from the East Coast of the US today. Then we have Khalid Mirza. Khalid is Senior Director, Global Market Access and Pricing for Oncology at Daiichi Sankyo Inc. He's a strategic leader in market access and pricing and reimbursement with extensive experience across US and global healthcare systems. He has experience across various market archetypes, including Europe, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. His experience spans across pipeline products, launch, inline products in oncology. He has been working in the pharma space for almost 20 years now. Welcome, Khalid. Then we move on to Paul Goudreau. Paul is Senior Vice President, Value-Based Healthcare at Actu-Real Inc. Paul has 30 plus years of experience in various roles across research and development. And most recently, he was heading up market access, global market access, peri-approval, post-approval, and product development at Covance, acquired by LabCorp. Prior to joining Actu-Real, he led market access consulting group at LabCorp Drug Development. He's also been at Merck and associated with Keytruda market access readiness and launch for a long time. So welcome, Paul. So with that, let me ask Imrose to turn over the next slide. So we'll have Luca take over and present his slides. Luca, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhur, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for inviting me today to this session. First of all, I would like to share with you that these are my thoughts and they don't represent the thoughts of my company, Merck, and I will share with you my experience over the last 25 years working on launching products across the different country. As you know, risk sharing agreements or managed entry agreements are not new to us. It's almost 20 years that we are speaking innovative way or innovative contracting or managed entry agreements for several compound at time of launch. This is the reason why today I would like to take the opportunity to share with you some of my experience and provide you a sort of framework how to think forward where we are launching a compound in a different therapeutic area. Now, if we move ahead with the next slide, oh, sorry, it's on me. So it's a quite an important topic, and if you check all the publication that has been done over the last few years, if you check, on the website, you will find that there are different way and different definition to define the risk sharing agreement or managed entry agreements, and especially this kind of innovative deal are seen to mitigate the risk of introducing a high cost drug on country where it's possible to gain reimbursement. As I said, we're using the word innovative agreement or risk sharing agreement, but the taxonomy, as you will see in the next slides, is vary across the country, and each country tend to name them in a different way. The first thing that I would like to share with you, I don't think that there is one size fits all. So not all the country they might be focusing on this type of deal. So it's very important to tailor the approach on the right country and where is possible and feasible. Next slide, please. Here I wanted to provide you an overview of what happened over the last 10 years in terms of risk sharing agreement according to the global data risk sharing database. We have been analyzing more than 1,000 risk sharing agreement, and you can see that 70% of these agreements are financial based agreement, and 52% of this agreement they are focusing on oncology, 10% on infection disease, and the country that are using this kind of agreement are mainly UK 56% and Australia 11%. Obviously, this deal vary based on the country and based on the platform where this deal are built on. But obviously, there is a trend to create, this kind of deal to support timely patient access, and also there is a trend that show that there are some specific therapeutic area where potential we have early stage data where is more feasible than other. Now, if we move on with the next slide, I would like to provide you a little bit a taxonomy of this kind of risk sharing agreement or managed entry agreement. For sure, we have to very clear, in the life cycle of the product, especially of launch, if we want to run this kind of program, understanding which specific country are feasible to run this program, and understanding also how we can, which kind of deal we can put in place. As you can see here, there are financial deal, they are a patient outcome deal or evidence deal. For sure, we need also to understand what our payer wants. So the other key message that I would like you to bring at home today is that this cannot be a one-way strategy. We need to understand what our stakeholder really wants and what is feasible for our stakeholder. Remember that one of the key things that is very important is to create simplicity for payer and understanding exactly how we share the risk and the condition in the way that this kind of deal are run, and has to be tailored to the specificity of the product and to the specificity of the therapeutic area. For sure, the thing that this deal are created is to create a timely patient access, so speed up time to market for patient, and also potentially to have more predictability in terms of budget impact. Now, next slides, please. One of the things that I would like to share with you, and has been a very important experience, is related to manage entry agreements that are really allowed faster patient access to new innovation while managing budget. These are called multi-year, multi-indication agreement, and these were able to accelerate time to markets for new indication for cancer treatment for multiple cancer types. And as you can see on the left, if we compare the time to reimbursement, compare the weight indicator, I think that a great work has been done with this kind of deal to focus on the most important thing, our patient, and to create a timely patient access. And I think that this really help also payer to have some predictability in terms of their budget, but at the same time to provide innovation, new innovative solution to healthcare professional to treat their patient. I think that it's very important that we have not to forget. One thing is reimbursement, which is a typical job of our function, but there is an additional job, is patient access. Don't think that this deal will get straight the drug to the patient. I think that a lot of work has to be done to make sure that we create awareness with our regional or local payers or slash providers. Now, if we go to the next slide, I want just to provide you really some personal thoughts regarding managed entry agreement or risk-sharing agreement. First of all, as I said before, there are some countries that are more open compared to other to think in a different way to create timely patient access. But for sure, we need to understand that the managed entry agreement are the exception and not the rule. The other thing is this, that we need also to check what payer has already available. If you think, for example, the new CDF one in the UK, I think that has been a very good experience to create timely patient access and to tailor some specific deal for some products or some indication where the data were still in early stage and we were waiting and payer were waiting for the follow-up data. I think also that the other very important point is that we need to focus on something that is very simple, understandable to our payer, that can create budget predictability. And from our side, we put first the patient, and we can really leverage, the flexibility of this deal. For sure, this deal has risk and benefit. And in the way that I see this, for me, is that we cannot afford to have asymmetry. There is not a perfect deal. I think that we need to move forward together with payer to make sure that the risk and the benefit are shared from both us as manufacturer and also from their side. And of course, one point that is very important that I'm just mentioning now, but perhaps needed to be mentioned at the beginning of my speech, that all this agreement has to respect confidentiality. I think that confidentiality for us is very important for all the solution that we find with our payers. Now, The last point that I want to make here, and is my last slide, and after I will give the words to my colleagues Khalid, is really, could you move to the next slide? I wanted just to provide you a sort of an understanding how, in a very simple way, I approach manage entry agreement or risk sharing agreement for all the products that I work in the past and during the life cycle of these products. For sure, there are some critical factor that has to be considered, not only in terms of having clear objective, understanding the target patient population, and the measurement of this deal, but I think that is also very important to understand the potential exit strategy when this deal can be stopped, for example, for gaining full reimbursement. And I believe that there are very important phases that has to be followed in the implementation of this kind of deal. One thing that for me is very important is that time to time, I do believe that we are building in the life cycle of the product some opportunity that we see only with our eyes. As a access leader, we need really to put ourselves in the shoes of payers and understanding what is their real need and what they want. This is the only way to create a win-win situation between payer, the manufacturers, and to create timely patient access. I do believe that if we don't open the dialogue well in advance with payers, I think that is going to be very difficult to have a successful launch. Last point. Don't think that risk sharing agreement or managed agreement are going to fix all the problem that you have. There are some specific situations, some specific country, some specific products that require to have risk sharing agreement, and I would really focus more on the country that they are leveraging this as a way to create timely patient access than having a broader plan that potentially is not entering enough in the detail and the execution. Having said that, thank you very much for the time, and I now give the stage to Khalid. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Luca. Great presentation and really great insights. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone on the call. A quick introduction, and Madhur did that very well. I'm Khalid Mirza. I'm the Senior Director for Global Pricing and Access at Daiichi Sankyo. So I'll be also building on a lot of the insights and themes that Luca just mentioned really eloquently in his slides just prior to this. Madhur, if you don't mind moving to the next slide. So as standard, these what you will hear from me today are my own opinions. They're based on my own experience and insights through my journey in my career so far, and they don't reflect that of Daiichi Sankyo. Next slide, please. All right, let's start with the good. So I think we first need to pat ourselves on the back as industry for really coming up with some excellent drugs, medications, treatments that does make a material impact on patient lives, right? And you see that across the board. You pick any therapeutic category, and we have seen, or the industry has really made some great progress towards getting to that ultimate goal of a curative state. You've seen in hepatitis with Gilead and Sovaldi, and we've been building off of that. And you can look at other indications, therapeutic categories. Alzheimer's, recently Eli Lilly came up with I believe that they just released some data where they've seen some progress in Alzheimer's, which has been historically a very difficult area to show success. A lot of drugs have come and gone, but again, fingers crossed, we've been making some progress there. So with that in backdrop, let's just kind of applaud the industry, right? We've come up with some treatments, and a lot of my work has been in oncology. So most of my my talking points will be around oncology, right? So in the world of oncology, we starting to move towards specialized treatment, right? So it's not really a one size fits all or take one big gun and start firing at everybody, but we're starting to be targeted, starting to be specialized. So you see biomarkers, you see checkpoint inhibitors. Luca has played a really pivotal role in that, in his role at Merck and MSD. Paul and I have been part of that process. So again, we like to, that's a pat on our backs, but you see the checkpoint inhibitors, and then you see more recently the CAR Ts, and then you have gene therapies. So we're moving the bar, we're raising the bar higher. What that means is that it brings more value to the patients, right? So the patient, you have better clinical outcomes, better patient-reported outcomes. You have better, in other words, better quality of life, right? We're, again, to what I said a minute ago, we are starting to move more towards where the goal being having a curative therapy, right? So those are the benefits that the patient gets through the physician. But what does that also mean when you look outside of the lens of a patient? When you look at other stakeholders in the healthcare value chain, such as payers for us, right? For myself, for Luca, for Paul, payers are in our crosshairs, right? Because we need to make sure that the value is well understood by those critical stakeholders. Well, when you look at the payer, they're like, okay, patients are living longer, they're staying on therapy longer, which means the costs are going up. They're not going down, they're going up. And unfortunately, those costs are not just only in oncology. You see that trend following in other therapeutic categories, in specialty, in rare diseases, in orphan diseases. You see that same trend. So again, patients living longer, they're taking the drug longer. That means more cost. That means the payers have to find the space to absorb those costs for their populations, for their countries, for their societies. So that's kind of like the conundrum or challenge that we in the payer world are trying to do this balancing act, right? To make sure that we keep on providing innovative therapies to the patients, but still making all parties understand the value we bring to not just to the patient, but to their healthcare ecosystem, to their societies in general, and how can we keep this partnership moving in a healthy, on a healthy footing. Next slide, please. So, and Luca mentioned this very well in his quick presentation. I've kind of laid it out like the spectrum of risk-sharing agreements that you can see in the course of time. And Luca very well said that, nomenclature, the definition changes from market to market, from stakeholder to stakeholder. But when I try to simplify it, here's the spectrum of RSAs that you can see, right? They're broken into two buckets: financial-based versus outcomes-based. If you start from the left, Mother, if you can build the slide, there's another build to the slide. Yep. And if I look at in my own recent experiences in oncology or in oncology in general, the payers and the industry, their conversations really more revolve around financial-based agreements back to the point that I just mentioned to you a minute ago about impact to their budgets because resources are finite. So they talk about financial-based agreements, more looked at focusing on the population level, right? You look at what you see the box in red, some derivative of cappings, PVAs, price volume agreements, right? But if you look across from left to right, there are every now and then you'll see discussions around patient level contracts, but that's really another word of patient caps, where that's cap is based on number of patients, or it's capped on patient costs, right? You go through agnostic, at least in the oncology world, you start to see some discussions around flat pricing, cost sharing. Hasn't really gone very much, but you'll hear, side conversations around that. Under emerging, you start to see portfolio-based contracts, but that's really more germane to companies that have deep portfolios where you can spread the cost burden across your assets. You'll also see indication-specific pricing, which I believe is right now the other one of goals in the payer world that we operate in. is indication-specific pricing. Can we get to that point? There are some markets that are already ready for that kind of discussion, but a lot of the markets are not ready, or they really want to stay with the tried and true tested approaches for managing budget and costs. But that's something that, at least on the industry side, more and more conversations are starting to happen internally about, can we make indication-specific pricing work? And then you look at outcomes-based, performance-linked, right? The issue across all of those different flavors that you see on this slide is you and the payer have to align on the markers. Like, which markers are you going to use to determine whether it was the drug was successful or not? I'm going to give you a very simple example: diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It is a universal a consensus that A1Cs is the marker. If a drug is going to do well, you have to see a change in the A1C levels. It's a universal fact, and that's easy then for a payer and an industry to align on a performance-linked agreement, because you agree on the marker, or you agree on the metric that will then decide whether that drug is doing its job or not. In oncology, of course, it's not as straightforward as an A1C, but the point, that's the example that I want to just illustrate the concept that performance-linked has to be, it's only doable when you align on the metric or the marker for that disease. Evidence-linked coverage with research, I think that's also nothing new. Industry has always talked about this. Like, you know, basically the conversation will go, we have really good data, Mr. Payer, you know, look at the data, it's good, but if you have any uncertainty, we will prove our value in future research or trials that we will publish. So the proof will be in our pudding. We will confirm what we're showing you today with studies tomorrow. Some payers who are there where their infrastructure is a little bit more advanced, or they have a very savvy knowledge of the space, they may go in that direction. So you'll see that even in oncology, yes, we look at population level based contracts, but there is pulses across this dashboard where we can make some headway in some of these other RSAs, types of RSAs. And obviously it's a given that we can combine certain flavors together in a market that can do. So it's not just one, it's not binary, it's not zeros and ones. You can add a couple of different contracts to alleviate the payer concerns. And that's what Luca mentioned in his slides. It's like we have to make sure we sit down with the payers, understand what their pain points are, and try to address them where everybody comes out with a win-win situation. Next slide, please. All right, again, kind of diving a little bit deeper in oncology. If you look at the life cycle of an oncology product from launch to LOE, where does RSA play a role? In launch, most likely not. You won't really use RSAs during launch unless it's a novel treatment or disease or a novel mechanism of action, like the CAR-Ts. They used a creative RSA structure, both within the US and also out ex-US markets. Or if you look at Novartis and I believe Kite, they had some interesting, RSA packages even for the US market. And you'll see that Novartis for Entresto, back for cardiovascular, also had something similar, creative ways of launching that product with RSAs. As you move from launch to your first indication expansions, depending on how you manage that indication sequencing, if you launch with an indication in oncology and your next indication is a smaller niche tumor type, you may not need an RSA again. But if it's a larger tumor type where the population size is greater, it's impactful, it does really move the payer budgets, then you may want to think about an RSA to mitigate price erosion, right? To mitigate the pressure on price that the payer will put. And then as you move from there into earlier line indications, right? Or in other words, indication expansion, you start from late line therapies, moving into earlier line of therapies. That's where you see the focus of RSAs really coming in, right? The value of RSAs. coming in, because again, we want to make sure that we maintain the value of the product. We are providing value to all stakeholders in the healthcare chain, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So that's where you start to see RSA becoming more prominent in your thinking, in your strategy, and in your discussions with your stakeholders. As you head towards LOE, you're not at LOE, but you're heading towards LOE. And now you want to make sure that you can expand your indication footprint for your asset as much as you can. And that's where RSA plays another major role. And then to LOE, when you get to LOE, then it's really more of a strategic decision, right? Do you want to use RSAs to fight against the competition, generic or biosimilars, depending on what molecule you have, right? Then do you want to use RSAs to preserve, to maintain your presence in the markets, in your key global markets? Next slide, please. All right, and I think I've touched a lot of this already, but what is happening on oncology today? So as Luca has also mentioned, that in oncology, global spend is increasing year over year. So in 2021, it was $185 billion. It'll be going over $300 billion in the next two to 3 years. So this cost density is not going away. It is here to stay. So how are payers going to handle with this dynamic, right? With this trend? So when you look at a payer, they're really thinking about not complex RSAs, not even RSAs in general, because that requires more paperwork, more infrastructure burden on them to make sure that they can stick to the RSA structure. But what they want is a simple discount. You know, can you give us a straight discount and we just move forward? Or they will start to think about restrictions to access. They'll talk about caps of either budget caps or treatment caps. So that's what the payers immediately go to when they start to think about this. And we believe on the industry side is that we can find other creative ways of addressing their concerns, you know, whether it's indication-based pricing. Luca mentioned about multi-year, multi-indications. Either we do that, some sort of financial contracting, amortized payments. So there, we believe there's other ways of getting to the same end goal, which is managing costs, making sure that the access to drug is there for patients. And if I haven't mentioned it earlier on, that's one important point that everybody should understand, that our goal is to make sure we get the drug to patients. There is no use to industry for a drug just sitting on the shelf. We do the drugs to help patients, right? We need to the goal is to get the drug to patient. And payer is a gatekeeper along with the physician. So when we talk to payers, our goal is to get it to the patient, right? So we need to work to a solution. Payers have their ways of solutions. We propose other ways to getting to the same places. That the drug should be in the patient hands so that they can derive maximum benefit. So it's a partnership, but we understand each side's position, where their starting points is, and we have to find a win-win to make sure that the patient gets what they need. Next slide, please. And I believe this is my last slide. Again, it's kind of going to what we just talked about 30 seconds ago. Payers focuses on budget impact, cost containment. Some markets find outcome-based contracts burdensome. Some markets don't have the infrastructure, data infrastructure like the US does, or many of the EU5 markets have that infrastructure. Some markets have policies and regulations that kind of make it difficult for those kind of arrangements, such as rebating in Saudi Arabia is not really allowed. There's no portfolio deals in Romania. So some of it is just policy barriers that that's the way they have, built their rules and laws. So we have to respect that. And then, payers and governments really don't buy the socioeconomic benefits of treatment, right? They're very focused on making sure the drug works in the patients and that the cost can be managed. When we talk about more philosophical or conceptual about benefits to society, economic benefits to your healthcare system, they really don't take that long-term view. They take a more near-term view of the same issue. That's where we are today. Where we want to go is more of a partnership, like I mentioned, a holistic discussion about, how to get there to that ideal state, which is data infrastructure. I think markets should invest in data infrastructure so we can track financial and outcomes, financial metrics and outcome markers. They need to keep a relatively open mind around RSAs that will address their concerns. They should also kind of think about the voice of the patient, focus on that, about the life outside of the hospital, outside of the doctor's office, and also see the benefits of what a drug can do for their overall society. Again, this is not an immediate solution. It's a journey. This will take time, but I think we need to start today as an industry in partnership with our payers to have those discussions. Yeah, of course, focus on the near term, make sure that their cost concerns are addressed, but in parallel, work on shaping the thinking around, drugs and the value that they provide on the whole. And I believe that was my last slide, Madhur, but if you want to go to the next slide, I think this was it. All right, then it is my pleasure to hand it over to my very good friend, Paul. We've been in many battles together, so Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Khalid. That was excellent. And thank you, Luca, for your presentation as well. That was very, very good. So what I'm going to wrap up with is some case studies talking about managed entry and innovative access arrangements. Next slide, please, Imros. So a growing number of payers in many countries have turned to managed entry agreements and other innovative access arrangements to allow rapid access to new medicines that meet significant unmet medical needs. So as noted by both Luca and Khalid, there are numerous types of MEAs and IAAs, and they can be grouped really into three broad approaches, as we've discussed. First, there's the financially based schemes to control budget impact. There's outcomes-based schemes to manage variable drug response rates and efficacy. And then there's coverage with additional evidence, or RWE, to increase certainty of treatment efficacy. Next slide, please. MEA and IA usage is increasing. Regulatory agencies are licensing increasing numbers of new treatments via accelerated approval mechanisms. From 2019 through 2021, 22% of new drugs approved by EMA received a conditional marketing authorization or approval under accelerated assessment. 37 of 50 new drug approvals by the FDA in 2021 were via either fast track designation, breakthrough therapy designation, priority review, and or accelerated review. So payers are increasingly turning to the use of the MEAs and the IAAs to provide access to these new treatments that might meet high unmet medical need. Next slide, please. So we've talked about this before, but here we laid out the taxonomy of the main types of MEAs. So as noted previously, there's the three main approaches: financial, outcomes-based, and coverage with evidence development. In terms of the financially based schemes, you have price volume agreements where drug price is inversely tied to the volume of usage, discounts and rebates where the manufacturer makes a financial concession in return for reimbursement. Free stock can be used. There's budget caps where the total drug expenditure by the payer is limited. Utilization and time caps where the manufacturer absorbs the cost of treatment beyond a defined duration or amount of usage per patient or for a cohort of patients. And a fixed cost per patient where the same cost per patient without regard to the amount of usage. In terms of the outcomes-based schemes, you have outcome guarantees where the manufacturer provides a refund for patients not meeting specified outcomes. You have patient eligibility controls where access is restricted to patients meeting very strict eligibility criteria. You have conditional treatment continuation where treatment continuation is based upon patients meeting strict and specific outcomes. And then you have a process or care approach where reimbursement is linked to defined treatment protocols. And then, of course, there's coverage with evidence development, which is designed to address uncertainty, and reimbursement and pricing approvals are reevaluated on a regular basis based on review of new data sets. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about three country-specific case studies. The first one is the UK. The UK was an early adopter of managed entry. In 2002, a risk-sharing agreement was initiated to provide outcome-based reimbursement for multiple sclerosis therapies. This RSA was later deemed unfavorable for a variety of reasons, including the high administrative burden, the slow patient recruitment, poor study design, including a poor choice of comparator and outcomes measure, and a difficulty linking outcomes to price. The UK then shifted away from outcomes-based reimbursement schemes to providing access based on simple discounts, which is what a lot of payers try to do as a first step. In 2016, the UK reassessed its access strategy, and the Cancer Drugs Fund, which was mentioned by Luca earlier, was modified to provide interim funding for promising new oncologics, pending a reassessment based on generation of real-world data. The UK then also initiated an accelerated access review, the AAR. The AAR proposed establishing RSAs between the National Health Service and manufacturers. As part of that, the UK also adopted price volume agreements, conditional reimbursement, deferred payments or annuity-based pricing, outcomes-based payments, and product service bundling, as Khaled described. Next slide, please. In January of 2021, the UK launched a new innovative licensing and access pathway, the ILAP, which offers early access to promising new treatments. Then in February of that year, the UK launched the Commercial Framework for New Medicines. The new framework outlined the new strategy covering and managing managed entry. So the main types of schemes outlined in the framework included simple patient access schemes, complex patient access schemes, commercial access agreements, including things like budget caps, cost sharing, price volume agreements, stop-start criteria, and outcomes-based agreements or payment by results. Managed access agreements are part of this, and those are largely utilized by the Cancer Drug Fund. Budget impact schemes are included, and coverage with evidence development, or CED, is an important component of the new framework as well. Next slide, please. Second case study is Italy. Italy was one of the first countries to pursue the use of managed entry agreements. Their strategy was supported by an extensive national system of patient registries, which was particularly robust in oncology at that time. In 2006, Italy initiated the first outcome-based MEA to address uncertainties for some cancer therapies. Then, a decade later, in 2017, Italy introduced a new process for evaluating the degree of innovation inherent to promising new therapies. This scheme was based on unmet medical need, additional therapeutic value, and quality of evidence. Treatments determined to be fully innovative were eligible for funding via two new budgets, one for innovative oncologics and one for innovative non-oncologics. In 2019, Italy introduced a modification of its payment by results model to include payment at results. This modification was used to address the new cell and gene therapies, which we've discussed previously during the webinar. Payment is by the addition of installments in order to spread out the cost of the treatment to the healthcare budget instead of the healthcare budget absorbing one large upfront cost. Next slide, please. Third case study is Spain. In 2010, Spain was a little bit later to the MEA game than the UK and Italy. In 2010, Spain negotiated their first managed entry agreement. And since that time, historically, the MEAs have been managed at the regional or local level in Spain rather than at the national level. In 2013, Spain negotiated its first national level MEA for a treatment for multiple sclerosis. So as of May 2016, a study had identified 30 MEAs in Spain. 26 of these were RSAs, risk-sharing agreements, while the remaining 13 were expenditure caps. 12 of the expenditure cap treatments were at the national level, only one was at the regional or local level. So the national payer was really leveraging expenditure caps up through that time. In 2019, Spain launched the VoucherMed, which stands for the information system to determine the therapeutic value of medications with a high health and economic impact. The objective of VoucherMed is to provide optimal information for appropriate decision-making at different levels of pharmaceutical provision at different stages of the drug life cycle. As part of that, VoucherMed provides support for outcomes-based agreements. OBAs with installment payments have been critical in providing access to the new CAR-T therapies in Spain. And in fact, a new gene therapy to treat spinal muscular atrophy is subject to a managed entry agreement that includes payment by results and a price volume agreement. So as you can see, every payer approaches these differently. They have different terminology and they have different levels of risk acceptance for different schemes. Next slide, please. So one of the threads running through all of this is the importance of real-world evidence. So as seen in the case studies for the UK and Italy and Spain, real-world evidence, or RWE, is often an important component of an agreed-to MEA or IAA. Payers are putting increasing importance on the value of real-world evidence to providing patients access to new innovative treatments, particularly in regards to the new cell and gene therapies. Now, an important new approach to understanding how a new treatment that has generated little real-world evidence to date would perform in a real-world setting is the approach of in silico phase fall modeling, which is something we are working on here at Actu-Real. And basically, at a high level, what happens is we create an in silico replication cohorts of phase 4 digital cousins on standard of care. These are small cohorts that meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria of the randomized clinical trials called the RCT proxy cohorts, and large cohorts that include those that do not meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria. We then characterize the model variables related to clinical benefits in the large cohorts, which we call the big model. And then we adjust the model variables in the RCT proxy cohort, which we call the small model, to reproduce the new treatment benefits demonstrated in registration trials. Then we apply the adjustment from the small model to the large cohort. Next slide, please. In this slide, we just give you more of a high-level view of what the problem statement is, what the use case is for the approach of in silico phase 4, and then what the general solution idea is, which I summarized in the previous slide. If there's any questions about the in silico phase 4 approach, we have one of our co-founders and the lead for this with Actu-Real, Pierre Etienne, is on the line and part of the webinar as well. This is my last slide. I will stop there and I will turn it over to Medor for the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Paul, Luca, and Khalid. I think a very exhaustive overview of risk-sharing agreements. There was a pan-Atlantic flavor, if you will, to how these pan out differently in different geographies. So, given that we have 13 odd minutes left, we will do as follows. So, first of all, if any of our attendees have questions, you may type them into the chat bubble above, and we'll try to address those, curate and address those either today or, after the webinar. We plan to have this webinar recorded and the recording made available so that this can be a go-to resource after the webinar is over. And what we want to do now is basically, get perspectives from our three panelists, Luca, Khalid, and Paul, on certain themes that seem to emerge as part of their discussion. So, Luca, if I may turn over to you first, you did mention about this whole price transparency thing, and if in fact, as part of the larger European convention, there are a lot of payers at a national level that are collaborating, whether it's the Nordics or the Benelux, to negotiate prices jointly. But do you feel that the price transparency at a policy level is a threat which is emerging now? And what are your thoughts in terms of that affecting the viability of risk sharing agreements? Generally speaking, just curious to know your perspective.
Thank you for the question. I will be very short, despite the question require potentially another workshop to discuss about that. I do believe that one of the answers to this question is coming from the UK. 56% of this deal are coming from the UK to the patient access scheme. So I do believe that if we want to put in place a new managed entry scheme or risk-sharing agreement scheme, I do believe that we need to respect the confidentiality of this kind of deal, and so also regarding the price. Also because time to time, in fairness to who has experience in this field, it's quite difficult to calculate, the net price, and this is usually is done retrospectively based on the outcome of the deal. If you consider some of the business case that's been provided by Paul and Khalid, I do believe that one of the things that is very clear, especially if we are focusing on outcome-based agreement, is really to give time to collect the data, audit the data, and provide the potential quote payback if it's the case. So you understand that also the net price is just a detail of an overall strategy. I do believe that the confidentiality it's very important, and please keep in mind that each country has its own pricing and reimbursement rule. It's not that one size fits all. I hope that I was able to answer your question at a short notice and link up with the great example that has been provided by Khalid and Paul.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ed, Luca. As you said, at a European level, given the discussions around EU net, HT, etc., coming to a common consensus, it's interesting and a difficult exercise at a policy level, right? Given all the country level differences, country level mandates when it comes to pricing and all of that. So, if I may move on to Khalid and Paul, I mean, clearly in your discussions and in your talks today, you highlighted the growing importance of risk sharing agreements generally, but also in the context of real world evidence, right? A lot of new sources of real world data are becoming available, faster, more sophisticated analysis. Regulators are becoming more, receptive to real world evidence, generally speaking, whether it is EMA or the FDA. So, would be great to get your sense of how relevant real world evidence is to the development of risk sharing agreements in the future. Will we see more risk sharing agreements despite all the challenges that have been highlighted today? Perhaps Khalid and Paul, if you can share your perspective on the whole real world evidence and RSA link, that would be great.
It's a great question, Madhur. The short answer is yes. I think you will see RWE growing in prominence when it comes to RSAs. I think my own 2 cents on this is RWE is only going to grow, and only for this simple explanation is that when we go to payers and we say, okay, we're going to supplement our evidence package with RWE, their question is then, well, I need RWE from my own populations, right? In the US, we're a very data-rich country, as Paul and Luca know. We have Flatiron, we have other databases that we can dig into. Sometimes the payers will take those and say, okay, yeah, similar populations, fine, we'll take the US, but every market would ideally like to have RWE from their own people. And just because of that very fact, I think RWE is going to grow. I think Europe will start to get more organized. We'll have better sources of RWE that we as industry can then pull from to show the value of our assets with payers. I think as you move outside of Europe, I think it's definitely an area of focus, and that in discussions from industry to those payers, this is coming up. Like, our suggestion is that they should invest in data infrastructure so that we can then build RWE for their own populations. So let me just stop there. And Paul, anything else if you'd like to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Khalid. I agree with everything you said there. I think as we adopt more broadly, globally, electronic health records, you're going to see more automatic data capture and more real-world data available to analyze and extract meaningful information from. And so that's going to lead to greater usage of RWE going forward in this realm. And then I think as the industry has swung from diseases that are very broad in their consequences across the population, like say hypertension or hypercholesterolemia, and the focus now is on rare diseases, genetic-based diseases, cell-based therapies, and really niche indications where you have much smaller patient population. It's going to be a lot more tractable to be able to track the outcomes for those patients so that you can structure an agreement that allows a manufacturer and a payer to agree for, say, a pay-for-performance type of scheme, which has been hard to implement in the past. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Khalid and Paul. So I think it would be a miss if the kind of broad and vast pharma industry experience that all three of you have had. We want to leverage that to the fullest possible extent. So let me sort of open it up to the three of you in terms of how risk sharing agreements are, at a market access strategy level, in the course of clinical development. I mean, we have all these discussions where, HEOR inputs now, health economics outcomes research, as a team has the mandate to provide inputs into the clinical development program at various stages, whether it is outcomes of interest, about the label, patient population, etc. Right? So in the larger context of things, how has risk sharing agreement been a part of the pharma industry discussion with regards to internal strategy? Is it always an afterthought? Is it thought about earlier enough? And what are your suggestions as to how the pharma folks can leverage, think about risk sharing agreements early within the context of their internal therapy, right? So would be great to have your thoughts on that.
If you want, I start. For me, it's very simple. And I keep saying to my team the following. It's okay to think out of the box, but let's not forget that we have to do a great job in terms of executional excellence. So I do believe that risk-sharing agreement is a part of the access, the global and value access strategy of a specific product. I do believe that is very important to inform the decision, also considering the specificity of the product, of the therapeutic area, and the specificity of some payer. I would really suggest that this has to be one of the strategy to gaining time in patient access in the country where usually there are a delay in terms of patient access. But this cannot be the only strategy that we can put in place to create access. Let's be very clear. There is a tendency to find the buzzword to put everything in, and this is not risk-sharing agreement. I think that the buzzword is to have a comprehensive access and pricing strategy, and within the access and pricing strategy, an understanding of the leverage that we can have in terms of manage entry agreement, discussing openly with the payers across the different market. I don't know, Khalid or Paul, if you think in a different way based on your experience.
No, I totally agree with you, Luca. I would even simplify that. I would say that RSA is definitely a tool in our toolbox. But if I can get to Luca's point, if I can get to the end, to the finish line, using RSA as a lever, like in other words, if I talk to the payer and I say, we talk about the value, about the data, and then I say, okay, I still feel like you're uncertain. Okay, let's talk about risk sharing agreement. And in the course of that discussion, the payer says, you know what? That's too much work for me. Let me just go back to a simple agreement, but this time everybody's happy. Like I'm happy, the industry person is happy. Guess what? My objective is achieved. I get access to the patient for my drug. So yes, RSA was a little bit of a part, but it wasn't the way we got there. It's just the conversation went and the payer realized, hey, it's easier for me to just talk about a simple price volume agreement or a simple discount and I get the job done, right? So yes, so in that way, the RSA helped the conversation, but we didn't have to use RSA to get there. So that's what I think that what Luca is also saying is that We just want to make sure that the strategy gets to where we can give the drug to the patients.
Yeah, I agree. So the way I think about it is an RSA is a menu item on the list of items that we can leverage as the pharma side to make an agreement with a payer to get a new treatment to patients, which is the ultimate goal. We want to treat patients any way we can, right? And make sure that the patient gets what they need, the payer gets what they need, and the manufacturer gets what they need. So every single payer for every single different therapeutic, you need to have that RSA menu item on your menu list so that you can have that conversation if needed. Some payers are just going to want a straight discount. That's just all they want. They don't want to think about anything else. Other payers that have a more sophisticated approach or more sophisticated system will be open to more of a risk-sharing agreement approach. It really is up to the market access team to figure out which approach is going to work best for which payer in which country. And so RSA is important part of that. It's not an end-all be-all solution.
Great. Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Luca and Khalid. So with that, I think we are on the top of the hour. I do notice that there are a couple of questions from Elaine directed towards Luca and Khalid. So Elaine, as a follow, what we will do is we'll run by these questions with both of our speakers, and we'll get their responses back to you. We will also make this recording of the webinar available for you to review. And I think with that, it's time for me to thank all the three speakers for their insights on this rather interesting topic. We know that risk sharing agreements are here to stay, even if they may not be the go-to plan A strategy, as our panelists mentioned, rightly so. They may become more sophisticated as more forms of real world evidence become available. But if you have a drug that works, there's nothing like it. There's more value in a simpler story told and understood by the payers than anything else. So I think at the end of the day, that simplicity has its own comfort with regards to ensuring access to the patients. I think that's where all of our goals converge. So with that, I'd like to thank all three speakers and panelists today. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Paul. And all our attendees. Again, we hope to have this discussion continued in the follow-up that we have with you. Thank you for all your time and attention. Goodbye.